Pilates is having a huge moment online and in the cultural zeitgeist, but what if I told you that what you were doing is not actually Pilates? My name is Melanie. I am a certified full-time Pilates instructor. I've taught thousands of people in New York City and online, and today we're going to break down several different things that are called Pilates, whether or not they can actually be considered Pilates, and what you need to know when you're picking your workout. Before we get started, I feel we have to level set on what Pilates is and where it comes from. Pilates was originally created by this guy, Joseph Pilates. He was a German athlete, and as legend has it, he created the Pilates system to help injured soldiers recover when he was interned as a German national in an English prison camp in World War I. How did we get from there to today? Good question. Joseph Pilates eventually moved to New York, founded a studio, and then made it his life's mission to create the Contrology system, which today we know as Pilates. He was the man who did it. He had a very specific order, and he taught until he died. After that, all hell broke loose. Basically, he created no succession plan, so all of these prominent people who he had trained as students, and only a couple people he certified, ended up taking the Pilates system and created their own versions of it. Now, to make a very long story short, it was eventually determined in a court of law that Pilates could not be copywritten. So that means that the Pilates that you see out in the world today can really mean anything. It does not have to mean what Joseph Pilates taught back in the day. Is that a good or a bad thing? I would say yes. It is yes, and we'll get into why. It was originally one specific way of moving that emphasized control, flow, breath, concentration, and a number of other key principles that were critical in these very specific exercises to getting the Pilates experience. What do we do with that information? We will look at 4 of the common types of Pilates and Pilates that you might see. I just want to say I'm not a sole arbiter for what is and is not Pilates. If you find something you like to do, go do it. I love that. The best exercise is the one you want to do. But it is helpful to understand where some of these different exercise systems came from versus what the original intention of the Pilates name or Pilates system was. Number 1, influencer mat Pilates. Undoubtedly, you've seen these influencer 30-day Pilates challenges pop up, and there are some qualified instructors running these, and there are also some people who I do not think are instructors. In some cases, I see no evidence of formal study of Pilates, certification, or frankly, even basic adherence to Pilates principles. So what do you get when you encounter these challenges? Many times they are videos of an individual demonstrating a series of exercises that typically are mat-based with no verbal instruction cueing you on what the exercise is, what you should be focused on, and what you should avoid. Sometimes the form is also very questionable, and the reason why that is an issue is if the only cue you have to go off of is what you're seeing visually on the screen and the exercises are not demonstrated with proper form, people at home will assume that that is how you should be executing the exercises, and therefore maybe putting their own health and safety in jeopardy. Furthermore, many times the exercises are not rooted in the Pilates system and also do not adhere to the Pilates principles. Now, form that's not 100% doesn't necessarily mean that an instructor doesn't know what they're talking about, but if they're not talking about anything when they're demonstrating and the form is bad, chances are they may not be the best person for you to be learning from, especially if you are a beginner. Additionally, if you are not seeing or hearing information about key Pilates principles like controlling movements, you are not getting the original intent of the Pilates work. So what do you do with that information? My suggestion is you don't necessarily have to write off influencer challenges, but I do recommend that you look for trainers with a legitimate certification and instruct Pilates and Pilates-based exercises with the Pilates principles in mind. Influencer challenges, are they Pilates? Probably not, but do your research. Now, this next one might be a little bit more of a gray area, so you're going to want to listen up. There is so much confusion around reformer Pilates versus Pilates and what different types of reformers actually are, and are you actually learning Pilates? Megaformer is a perfect example of that. Megaformers are those really beefy reformer-looking machines that have springs and have a mobile carriage just like a standard reformer, like this Mamba Jamba here. But they also have big handle attachments. The beds are really wide. From my perspective, the biggest difference in how megaformer classes go is not necessarily in the machine, it's in how they are taught and what they focus on. Now, if your main exposure to Pilates has been solid core, Legree, or SLT, those are all examples of modalities that may be considered Pilates or Pilates adjacent that are taught on a megaformer. But are they actually Pilates? I would say for people who've gone through rigorous Pilates certification, most of us would probably say that megaformer workouts are not really Pilates. Megaformer classes typically focus on time under tension, how long you can continue an exercise before you hit muscle failure, which frankly it can be good. That is a great way in many cases to achieve hypertrophy, which is muscle building. We like that. But one of the challenges of always going to failure is sometimes the form suffers, and in Pilates, form is crucial. It's one of the key things that we focus on. So if the main objective of your fitness modality is to potentially sacrifice form with the goal of always hitting failure, that's not in line with the Pilates principles. So that's one way in which it differs greatly from the traditional view of Pilates. The other thing is a lot of the exercises that you will see in your solid cores, your Legrees, your SLTs are really fitness-based exercises and not what you would normally see in a Pilates class. From my admittedly limited exposure to it, it's very plank heavy. There are a lot of lunges, which is cool. Some of that stuff you do see in Pilates repertoire, but again, a lot of it is focused on this burn, this muscle failure. And from what I've seen, not always leading through a lot of warm up that's going to help you stabilize and prepare for some of those advanced movements. Now, is it difficult? Yes. And that can be really great. In fact, a lot of athletes tend to explore megaformer classes when they first get interested in Pilates, which is great. Some of these methods also do focus a lot on control. Some of that really does harken back to the Pilates principles. Now, would I consider this Pilates? I would say not really. It's probably more Pilates adjacent. I would say like a cousin or a second cousin to Pilates. If you love it, do it. I think that's great. But if you are hearing about Pilates and wondering what the fuss is all about, and especially if you're someone who's not like already in athletic shape, it might not be the best first step for you. Now, here's where things get a little less black and white from my perspective. Number 3 is contemporary Pilates. Well, what the hell is that? Before megaformers entered the chat, the whole debate in Pilates land was contemporary versus classical. And what does that mean? Contemporary, basically, in a nutshell, is Pilates-based exercises that can include the classical repertoire, but also take some liberty and creative license with that. But they all ladder into those key original Pilates principles. So in a good contemporary class, you will get that focus on breathing. You're going to get that focus on control. There's going to be a lot of discussion around abdominal engagement, not just clenching your abs, but how do you root and support from the pelvic floor upward. Contemporary Pilates can be based on that. It can be based on machines. Now, if we're talking reformer specifically, which is the most popular equipment type for Pilates right now. If you see a machine, a reformer with springs that have different colors, and it is not one of those big bulky megaformers, chances are it is a contemporary Pilates reformer. Now this one is made by Balance Body. It's my favorite brand and maker. They are sort of the industry standard when it comes to contemporary reformers and contemporary Pilates equipment. So if you're in a studio or you're doing a YouTube video like one of mine that has these colorful springs, chances are that instructor is teaching from a contemporary training point of view. So what can you expect from contemporary Pilates? It should be based in that classical method, basic Pilates principles, but I like to say with sprinkles. Instead of sticking to that very clear exercise order, maybe you're adding a little bit of, oh, what if we did this? Oh, what if we did a little variation? All of that is considered contemporary Pilates. Now, if you have done any of the workouts on my channel or in my membership, you have done contemporary Pilates. I teach a lot of exercises from the classical repertoire, but I also include some fancy sprinkles. So that was the basis of my training. I've done a lot of private study in classical as well, but I like to be able to, color with some different markers, so to speak. However, not all contemporary instruction is created equal. Just like we talked about with the influencer challenge situation, and even to a degree, the megaformers, sometimes there is a lot of variability in the contemporary world for what certifications look like. As you're picking a trainer, you do want to look for somebody who is certified, who has gone through a robust training program and knows their stuff. You should hear a lot of detail in the instruction about how you place your body, where you're looking to feel activation, and how to avoid common pitfalls. If that sounds like something you're interested in, I fully recommend you check out my membership. I'll include the link in the description down below, but this will apply to anywhere you're looking, studios, private trainers, what have you. Now, the biggest and the boldest, the original classical Pilates. What is classical Pilates? This gets really complicated. We don't have time to unpack this in this video, but classical technically describes the original exercises and order in which Joseph Pilates taught them as what should be taught. Now, will there be variations? Of course. In private classical instruction, there will always be adjustments to account for an individual's specific needs, including but not limited to modifications and also advancement as people get stronger. But generally, it's following a very specific set of exercises. But are there different takes on what classical Pilates really mean? Wildly, yes. As if you remember in the beginning of this video, I mentioned that the disciples of Joseph Pilates sort of scattered and all did their own thing after he died. So depending on several factors, including where in the world you are doing your classical Pilates, where your teachers were trained, you might get a slightly different flavor of classical Pilates, which I think is so interesting. Many of the modern day classical Pilates instructors were trained along the lineage, so to speak, of Romana, who was one of Joseph Pilates' original students. She was a dancer, so many of her mild modifications to the classical order were very dance-based. Now this gets complicated, so if you want me to make another video about Pilates history and all of the Pilates drama, I'd be happy to do that. How can you tell if you're doing classical Pilates? Well, number one, the person teaching you will probably tell you. Number two, if you're on a reformer and the springs do not have color coding and they are all the same weight, and yes, they are springs, that is a signifier you might be on a classical machine. Number two is if the ropes and straps are leather and the handles are made of wood, you very well might be on a classical Pilates machine. If you are doing the same exercises in the same order, they all have names and there are relatively few reps. You're not spending too much time in one exercise and you're generally flowing from exercise to exercise to exercise. Those are all markers that you might be doing classical Pilates. But is it Pilates? Yes, of course it's Pilates. It follows the original intention of Joseph Pilates and what he outlined under contrology. So what do you do with this information? Ultimately, I think it comes down to taste, but if you like Megaformer, go do Megaformer. That's great. If you love a TikTok challenge, go do a TikTok challenge, but make sure you find one that is taught by someone who knows their stuff. If you like contemporary, go do contemporary. In fact, come do contemporary with me. I would love to see you there. And if you love classical, there's so much value to be gained from learning the original method and taking that form and influence into your entire practice, no matter what you do. So what do you think? Which form of Pilates have you done? What do you prefer? And what are your other burning Pilates questions? Please let me know down in the comments below. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about some of the most common Pilates form mistakes and how you can avoid them, I'll include a link to that video somewhere on screen here. Bye.